So, since I posted my beta mysteries on Kirby Air Ride, I've gotten a couple of you who wanted me to go kind of more in depth on the debug menu that's in Kirby's Air Ride. But by a couple of you, I mean one of you, and by one of you, I mean Troberts1115 wanted me to do this, so this video is for you, Troberts. So without further ado, let's get started because there is a lot to cover in this debug menu, let me tell you. But before I start this video, I want to thank the CuttingRoomFloor.net for providing all this information. Now, as I mentioned in the beta mysteries for Kirby Air Ride, this debug menu structure is very similar to the Super Smash Bros. Melee debug menu. And by similar, I mean they look pretty much the same. Now, it's pretty obvious as to why these both look similar. Both these games were made by the same company, HAL Laboratories. But I gotta say, out of the two games, Kirby Air Ride has the more complex debug menu out of the two games. Which is kind of weird because Super Smash Bros. Melee is a more complex game than Kirby Air Ride. But anyways, when you first open up the debug menu, you're greeted with a ton of options that you can mess with. So I'm going to be going over these options from the bottom up just because Race 3D mode kind of has the most interesting stuff in it. And I want to keep the best for last because that's the smart way to structure this video, I guess. Starting at the bottom of the debug menu with sync test, it's not really known what this option was for, but maybe it was used for syncing stuff up in the game? I have no idea, your guess is as good as mine. Now in sync test there's two options, and I'm sorry for totally slaughtering these names. The two options you have are Shura-Chi and Shura-Bo. Now both these options default value is set to 0, but I found one thing interesting while messing with the debug menu. When I changed the option for Shuro-Chi, I got this weird menu when I went into the game's actual main menu. And again, I have no idea what this menu does. It just has a lot of numbers and a load bar and it's colorful. I have no idea what it does. Anyways, moving our way up the debug menu, we got land menu test, which is pretty obviously a test for the land mode that was in Kirby's Air Ride. Yeah, that's right, if you forgot, Kirby's Air Ride had a land mode, and I'm not surprised if you didn't remember that because whoever used land mode on a GameCube? Like seriously, did anybody have one of these broadband adapters? I can't even think of any place that sold the broadband adapter, but anyways, ranting aside, if you go in the land menu test, you get an option to go to land menu, which is pretty obvious. It takes you to the land menu, and this is the first time I've ever seen the land menu because, like I said before, I never had a broadband adapter, so I've never seen this menu. Yay for seeing stuff for the first time. So, very fancily transitioning our way up the debug menu, we got our next option, which is LAN emulate, which obviously was probably used to test the LAN mode even more. And in the submenu for LAN emulate, you got two options, GC count and GC index, which is anyone's guess what these options did, though GC count was probably used to just test how many GameCubes you had connected together. So keeping this debug menu train a-rolling, we're up to our next option, which was ending test. And this allows you to view the endings for all three modes in the game without actually beating the game. Yay for spoilers! Not that there are any spoilers in this game. Next we got mem card tests. Guess what mem card stands for? Yep, you got it, memory card. Here you can just test the memory card. You can go to the utility, check the save, do a lot of boring stuff. Who cares about this? Anyways, moving on. Next we got movie test, which is you can watch all the movies in the game, like the opening movie and stuff, but you can already watch these in the menu, so this part of the debug menu is kind of pointless and boring because you can already watch these in the game normally. So moving on. Next we got rumble test, which is you test the different rumble patterns. Yay! So yeah, there's 33 different patterns to choose from in the game, and you can make the controller rumble to your heart's content. Yeah. Have fun with that, kids. Now, next up on our debug menu list is sound test, which is pretty obviously just a sound test. You can listen to all the background music and sound effects in the game to your heart's content. You can also change the pitch on some of these, and it's just a lot of fun stuff, I guess. One interesting thing to note about the sound test though is actually some of these options have been disabled, like the pan effect, which probably pan the music to one speaker to the other, but you can't really use the option anymore because it's disabled, I guess. Anyways, moving on. Next we got clear check, which there's only one option here, which is all flag on. And selecting this will fully clear the 3 checklist menus in the game, which, yay, you can clear your checklist and start the game all over. Have fun with that. And finally, before our last 2 really big options, we have option mode, which has 3 sub-menus, which are boost select, HUD select, and sound. Boost select changes the boost settings, I guess, but I believe it's disabled, so you can't really do anything with it. HUD select, it's really unsure what this did, but it's kind of presumed that it changed the HUDs in the game, so maybe there was different HUDs at one point in development. And lastly, we have sound, which just changes the setting from mono, stereo, to surround, to whatever you want to have your sound at. So finally, after all that boring stuff out of the way, we've come to the 2 last really big options in this debug menu, which are Race 2D mode and Race 3D mode. Now starting out with Race 2D mode, this is the debug menu for the top right portion of the game. Now it's actually interesting to note that since top right has its own separate debug menu from the rest of the game, it's thought that this mode was developed separately from the rest of the game entirely. Now this debug menu is definitely the most strange out of all the debug menus. It uses a weird Windows code, which makes it kinda hard to read, but you can read it if you really wanted to. You just have to translate the code, which I don't have the patience or time to do, so yeah. Now this debug menu doesn't really have any interesting options, really. It's mostly just normal stuff that you'd find in a debug menu, like testing courses, testing vehicles, and whatnot. So not gonna really spend that much time on this debug menu. So instead of wasting our time on this 2D mode stuff, let's move on to the most interesting stuff in this debug menu, which is Race 3D mode. Now Race 3D mode is the debug menu for the 3D engine in the game, which is Air Ride and City Trial mode. Now there is so many different options of Race 3D mode that you could change, so much so that I can make a totally separate video covering all these options. But I'm not going to be doing that because I'm too lazy to make another video, so we're going to cover it in this video. Now when you first go into Race 3D mode, you're greeted with 3 options: Normal, City Trial, and Stadium. Normal is for the Air Ride portion, City Trial is obviously for City Trial, and Stadium is for a City Trial match / Stadium event afterwards. Now once you enter these options, you have a ton of stuff you can change, like the player number, rumble settings, stage select, vehicle select. There is a ton of stuff, that way too much stuff to cover just in this video. So I'm just going to be covering the most interesting stuff in this debug menu, so this video doesn't go on for too long. Now the first thing I want to talk about is kind select. Now in kind select you can select if your character is a human or a CPU player. But there's actually 2 other options that are actually really interesting. There's an option to change your kind to Demo X or Boss X. Now Demo X is thought to be used in auto demos for the game, and maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Your guess is as good as mine. But Boss X, really, nobody knows for sure what this option does, and it's not even used in the Boss versus King Dedede mode. Now moving on, we got an option where you could change your vehicle type. And like I mentioned in the Beta Mysteries episode, there's actually a couple beta vehicles in this menu. Like being able to ride on both top ride vehicles, or being able to ride on this thing. Yay for this thing again. What is this thing? Anyways, moving along from that thing, not only is there an option to just choose Dedede, there's also an option to choose the versus King Dedede. Which is cool, I guess. He's slow as hell, but hey, it's still cool. Now the last thing I want to cover in this video is some unused stages, because yes, there's some of those in this debug menu. First up for unused stages, we got Dummy, which is a black void where you ride on the ceiling. That's all there is to this. Yay for Dummy! Now next up we got what I think is the most interesting unused stage in the debug menu. which is test. And I think this is the most interesting because it looks like it could have actually been an actual stage in the game at once. It's an ice theme stage that has 10 laps, and one thing that's really interesting is if you set an option to have enemy spawns on, the game will actually crash, and it's not why it crashes is because it's trying to load an enemy that's not in the game anymore. Now this is just a theory, but it could be true, I guess. Also, there's these strange designs on the floor, like these flashing stars which don't have any function anymore, but maybe there was some type of boost in the game? I have no idea really. Now next up we got Test 6 because Test 2 through 5 were too overrated for this game, I guess. Now Test 6 is kind of laid out in a drag race type of style, and it was probably used to test each vehicle's top speed and just test the driving in general. It's just a straight path. But if you seek your way over to the left of the course, you'll come across something that's pretty interesting. There's a bunch of test terrain just sitting out there with a bunch of Japanese writing on it, and you can slide around it and test the terrain if you want. Yay, because that's fun. But other than that, it's pretty much a featureless track. It does have a finish line at the end, which will end the race and bring you back to the debug menu. But other than that, there's really nothing else to it. Besides just one little last thing, if you manage to fall off the stage, you'll get this strange drop notice, which will play with a weird sound effect. Now this notice usually doesn't play in the final game, but you can get it to play in the final game if you manage to get underneath the world and fall. Now Kirby usually dies and respawns before the alert has time to trigger, but it is in the final game, and also it's interesting to note it doesn't seem to be affected by a set height. Anyways, moving on from that, we have Test 7, which is similar to Test 6, except it has some slopes. It's not just a straight path, it has some slopes which they increase in height over time, and you can fly off of some of them. That's really all that's different in this one. But our friend the drop notice actually makes an appearance in this course. If you actually turn around when you first spawn in the course and go backwards, the drop notice will actually start to play, which kind of proves that it's not set to an actual height, so yeah, that's a thing. And finally we have Symbol 2, which is a test room that you would actually find in any other game. It's a big square with a bunch of things that the game developers use to test different elements in the game. And I gotta say, I had a lot of fun messing around on this test stage. There's a lot here. Well, maybe I had a little too much fun here. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the whole debug menu of Kirby's Air Ride. Oh yeah, and there's also a crash debugger, so if your game ever crashes while using the debug menu, this fancy thing will pop up and you'll have to restart your console. It's not fun when this appears. Trust me, this happened to me a lot while recording this. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. If you want to see me cover any other debug menu in any other game, just leave it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do with that. But yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.